clear the
not.
sidewalks
No.
and the lawns.
Superintendent does. The superintendent takes it personal. He really does.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, snowbanks are everywhere.
About face.
Like
Is that what
Pete
you
was
call
saying,
it?
but there's nowhere to put
Give him
it.
a call.
But
Give him a call and just say, you know, when you get a
But
chance,
they've
if you can just
done-
do this.
Yeah.
they've done
I know, but I
they've done a good job with the roads. They've done a real good job.
I get to work and I'm gone,
Yeah, understood.
you know, and it's like
So which intersection were you saying?
high end Ashland. There's that triangle.
Ashland or Groveland?
No, Ashland. There's like a triangle there.
I mean, it depends on the position.
It's
though.
like, you would be like Auto Supermarket
Yeah,
on Brockton Ave, take that left,
yeah.
and then it's in there.
So down like towards Miragata.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, here we go.
That,
If you came up,
yeah.
there's an intersection, and
I'm sure my phone is
said,
I'm off
Excellent, Colonel, how are you?
Excellent.
in between 123 and Groveland.
oh, okay.
Well, I actually like
Tough
I
visibility.
like the second fast
Yeah.
report, actually. I'm a patron.
I went through all I see, and I can't wait until my daughter's finally getting old enough where I'll go up here.
It's like every morning I back out and I hope like crazy before I go any further.
Gotta go there this year. Good, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. I appreciate all of your patience. It's currently 19:10, 7 p.m. for the rest of the world. On March 4th, we'd like to call the meeting to order, so hello. This is what the Finance Committee looks like. I appreciate that. I'd like to actually entertain, we have an agenda in front of us that covers both the Police Department and the Fire Department's budget, as well as School Building Committee representative appointment for our group. We also have on the agenda liaison reports and review of minutes. I'd like to give an opportunity to talk about the minutes first. So just kind of following some pomp and circumstance, I would need to have a motion from the group to take review of minutes out of order.
Motion to take review of minutes out of order?
Second.
All those in favor?
I
Aye.
Any opposed? No, great, thank you very much. So review of minutes, I think we have the minutes that are included in our packet. Deb had sent them out also via email. It appears that Matt, three of us actually, need to abstain from voting on, but those folks who are here are welcome to make a motion if you so have one to make.
Motion to approve meeting minutes of February 25th, 2015.
Second.
Now, do we have any discussion amongst the group? I do believe that we have a member of the audience and the town manager who is here, who would like to offer some comments on a piece of the meeting.
Yes, thank you, Sean. I was not at the meeting, as you recall. I have seen it on tape. And I did want to correct something. Obviously, the minutes are whatever the minutes are. I'm not, that's not what I want to comment on. But Mr. Adams, our building commissioner, did state his belief that a former selectman, Mr. Aiello, may have participated in I'm sorry?
Not in the minutes.
I can't.
I didn't put that in the notes.
Okay, either way, I still think it was a public meeting. It was contact to the public, and I think it's only appropriate to correct a misstatement, whether it was made in good faith. Mr. Aiello actually did not vote on anything to do with fees that impacted plumbing or plumbers or electricians or anything else. One could take from that there was an implication of a conflict of interest. At the time, there was a request by the building commissioner to increase fees. He was asked by the board to do a survey, and subsequently he was asked to put that into a certain format for their review. That was the end of the conversation, and there actually was never a vote taken on that. So to the extent that Mr. Adams had his facts wrong, I just wanted to clear the record that Mr. Aiello did not participate in any vote at all in terms of setting fees. Whether that would have been a conflict or not is not for me to say. That's a whole different issue. But at least to clear up any implication that somebody acted inappropriately, I think that's only clear. I know Mr. Adams feels bad about it, and so if you're not happy to answer any questions, happy to follow that up. I just think at least it should be corrected in the same form that was put out there for the public.
Thank you for offering that counter, and I do respect that it was indeed, whether it's part of the written meeting minutes or not, it's part of the video record, so I appreciate that statement. Any other comments as it relates to, so the motion and a second is for the approval of the February 25th, 2015 meeting minutes. Matt, Liggy, and myself will need to abstain because we weren't here. So those who are here, all those in favor? Approval? Any opposed? And we have the 3 abstentions. So thank you very much. Chief Pajenski, thank you for your patience in allowing us to do that.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Well, actually, I think without further ado, we'll turn it over to you for your budget presentation.
Thank you, sir. And I do appreciate, first of all, I appreciate everyone's time here. I know I did leave a copy of the town report for 2014. I think it kind of reflects a lot of different thoughts, and also that's online for the public if they want to take a look at it on our website. One of the main portions of that is that we would, I just wanted to make sure that I thank the various boards, including this board, that volunteers its time. You know, quite a lot of hours, and I get it. I've met before, as you know, with the town manager. I did a preliminary budget. We've worked well together. We've made some adjustments on my budget. My original budget was reduced, working along with the town manager on an agreeable reduction. And I also realized that, you know, in a lot of ways, at one point I used to put on a lot of bells, a lot of whistles, but I also realized that the financial difficulties the town's facing. And I also know in my heart that everybody here gets, or maybe I'm overstating it, but I feel that everyone here gets that we need people at the police department. I don't think that's an issue. I think everybody is on board with that, and I respect that and understand that. With that said, my budget, and I certainly will go through piece by piece, or we can, if anybody has questions, I guess I'll throw it back at you. Would you like me to go through line by line item, or because it's pretty flat to what it was last year? Or do anything you want.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. I think it is prudent years over years. You do give that high-level description. I think that's prudent to talk about. For the group, for those of us who have been here for a bit, it's important to look at the transition, i.e. when we made the changes from the regular Crown Vics and we went to the four-wheel drive vehicles, and the efficiencies that you've experienced because of that, and more flexibility. But I think folks would like to hear kind of a broad overview, maybe a little bit of a line by line.
Perfect. Okay, and that's what you'll get. Like I had said, I guess we can start off. I'll go in with salaries and wages. In salaries and wages, you can see what I budgeted. Let me just grab my. Is 1.690562. That's all the salaries for 25 full-time police officers. That's including myself, the deputy, the lieutenant positions. And if I could, I'll take a second just to talk a little bit about that. We had, and I know, excuse me, because I know we've heard this many times before, but back in the 1980s and back in the 1990s, we had over 30 police officers. Currently, we have 25 police officers. Times have gotten a little bit more complex. Report writing from the 80s or the 90s to today, there was when you went on a call, you went in, you did something, you left. Now there's a lot of paperwork that's involved with it. If you really look at it, and I can give you an example right now. Today, I can tell you that there's 2 police officers working the road in the town of Abington. We have a sergeant and 1 patrol. There were times when we didn't talk about that because we didn't want to give up what was going on. But I think, honestly, I think everybody kind of knows that, and I think the people that we both work for and the people that we enforce the law against are pretty much aware of that. On the way in, we had a couple instances. This is just on the way here tonight. We had an instance where an officer was followed home by somebody else, so that kind of tied up the sergeant. This is on the way here. Sergeant gets tied up because there's an officer, there's a citizen that decides he's going to intimidate one of our officers and follow him home from the station. So we're tied up doing that investigation with an outside town, because the officer lives in a different town, and he followed them all the way home. And then we had a pursuit that came from Holbrook into here. That tied up that officer that was doing that investigation, the sergeant, now got involved in that. It went through several communities, ended up in Rockland. They ended up apprehending the individual. And then, as I was pulling in here, the other officer, so that officer's tied up, that sergeant. Now, the other officer gets called in for it was a larceny case. So come off the road and get in a larceny case. So I can tell you right now, there's nobody patrolling the town. That's shocking to me, and I hope it's kind of become what we do, and it should be, we should be out there proactively trying to enforce the law, and right now we're reactively enforcing the law, and I know I've been talking about that for a long time, but really it's come to a point where every day we're dealing with drug issues. I've been talking about that since 2004. Today, Section 35, that was one of the issues we dealt with. Yesterday was a drug issue with a heroin arrest. The day before was an issue with a arrest for somebody that was stealing out of a couple of our local stores, stealing the tip jar and this and that, and it's directly tied in. Now, I went into the booking procedure at that because we were so understaffed. I went down and helped them book, and I can tell you directly that was a drug issue. That individual had, he told me, he said, I needed a fix. So it's something, whether it be shoplifting, all the different stuff you're doing, you're seeing accidents, you're seeing, texting is number one, but drug issues on driving, you're seeing that more and more. Not the OUIs, it's the prescription drugs, it's the heroin, it's the different stuff. So we're finding it very, very difficult to keep up with policing with this number. It's an inadequate number. We have to be one of the most understaffed communities certainly in this area. Like, I can look over and say it. If we looked at Bridgewater, if I was to do the comparables of the town of Bridgewater, which is pretty comparable to here, I want to say they're close to 40 police officers. Town of Rockland, they're high 30s, if not low 40s. Very comparable. If you look around and you look at what we're dealing with and what we're doing, it's troublesome. And I guess, but I also understand. Look, I get that you're on the other side and you're hearing me, and your hands are kind of tied. And I know in my heart that you want to try to support, but I'm just kind of giving you the skinny on this. Since 2004, I took over as chief. This is my 11th year. We have not had a detective division. 2004. So nothing proactively is getting. When you see these arrests that you're seeing for heroin, these officers are making these in marked cruisers. Think about that. That's how blatant it is. They're in a marked police cruiser. They're not, it kind of gives you an idea of how, how out there it really is. So there was one point back in the 1990s that we had a real strong hold on it. We were very, very proactive. I can remember sitting here, I don't know if anybody was on the finance committee at the time, but I can remember we had a very active detective division, and I sat in here and said, we had five armed robberies that year. I remember saying this to the finance committee, and I said, yeah. I said, how many we solved out of 5? I said 5. And I don't think anybody thought much of it. I'm thinking, that's incredible. And that was a direct result of the detective division, because every one of those armed robberies was tied in with drugs, and they all had informants, and they all had, the follow-up work was tremendous. And you get these people either into treatment, or you get them into incarcerated, or whatever it might be, because they're not going to stop. They're going to come back. If they do it once, it isn't like, you're either going to do it in a different community. So we got to get a handle on it. So I guess that's my kind of spiel for personnel. I was talking to the town manager, and I was hoping to get a plan to hire 5 police officers and a school resource officer. Again, if you look, and you can look, since 2004, I've been talking about having somebody in our school system. We still have nobody in our school system. I think we are the only ones that I can think of, unless somebody can tell me a community that, I don't know of any other community that doesn't have at least one person in the school system. So that's troublesome. We have a much more diverse population, both socioeconomic. We really need to get a handle on it. What better thing to have somebody in the school, not to so much enforce, but wouldn't you love to have somebody, if you were a parent, to say, Johnny Jones, we can come up to you, we kind of know what's going on, and we see your kid maybe taking a turn, heading in a different direction. And you knock on the door and the officer says, hey, I don't know if you knew this, but, you know, your son or daughter is hanging out with this or that. You might want to keep an eye on somebody who takes a vested interest. I have officers that want to do it. I have a sergeant that would love to do it, and I have a patrol officer that just come out of the academy. He's not a kid, he's in his 30s. And he come out and he said, this is what I'd love to do, Chief. So we have the people that want to do it, we just don't have the resources. So, and the town manager and I both explored, and we're trying to look at ways to figure out how we could kind of fund it. And one of the ways is certainly you're paying an astronomical amount in overtime. I talked at length with the town manager about that. I gave him a proposal to what I thought. It's an upfront cost, meaning that if we hired 5 police officers, 6 police officers today, you wouldn't be a cost savings, because I still have to hire them. You're still a year out. You're still they got to go through the academy, they got to get through the field training. You're a good year out. And then at some point, in a year from now, you hold my feet to the fire, and you say, hey, listen, Chief, you said you were going to save X amount of dollars, and we were going to kind of wash this out. I'm on tape. I have no problem saying it, you know, like I'll do what I say. I think that can be a cost savings there, because I think you're paying, like I said, a lot of money to cover shifts with inadequacy. And what happens is if I have more people, I can maybe get the detective division back up and running. And then if people go out sick, if people go out vacation, if people go out injured, I can pull the detectives off and put them back in uniform to cover it, so we don't have to spend the money. So I think it makes a good sense, financial sense. And all I'm asking for, again, is to get back to what we had in the 1980s and 1990s. 6 police officers sounds like this. Oh my God, he wants 6 police officers. But what people don't realize is that we've lost throughout the years so many officers, and we've just kind of quietly done it, and we're getting to the point where we're broken. I got to be honest with you. We're broken, and I don't know what to do. So, but I also understand your situation. So that's my spiel on. And if anybody has any questions, sorry, I didn't mean to. You asked for this line by line.
I think it's important, Chief, because when you get stuck, when you look at it line by line, and maybe many of us do, maybe it's just me. I look at it line by line, and I think, geez, you know, there are. When you look at the crime statistics, you look at the work and the effort that's done by the community, you look at the number of folks that are boots on the ground, if you will. Right. And I think you have a reasonable plight. And when you look at what we're compelled to do, we look at numbers, and we look at percent distribution, and you make calculations that may not tie to the reality.
Understood.
So I think it's important to hear that. So I mean, when you look at the overtime as an example, when you look at straight wage for 25, and it's different because you have command staff and you have a very small command staff, and you have mainly field POs. You look at the average is $67,000 per person, just straight wage. When you back in all the other incentive stuff to get them to be an educated police force, it's $97,000. People scratch their head and say, geez. But then when you overlay that, it adds context.
Understood, thank you.
If I could interrupt,
please.
If you don't mind, just briefly. And the Chief and I have obviously had conversations about this, and you've seen my own information regarding the budget. And there's no question in my mind that this police staffing is the #1 issue and concern for the community. When we have the opportunity to seed the plan that the chief has presented to me, which makes a lot of sense. But again, it's a time frame of 1 to 2 years before you're going to start to reap the benefits. And, so my concern is being getting to the financial plan that we can actually put some of those funds up front, understanding that it's going to take some time. The chief says a year, but depending on what time, you really have to presume 2 years before you start to see I could call it a return, but a reduction in the overall cost, additional cost. Something that's probably in this, on the underside of $100,000, which is still not bad to get the staffing up the way the chief has proposed. So, again, I can't agree more that it is our number one staffing goal once we have some seed money to put in that direction. And it's certainly more important than some of the other very, very critical needs that have been expressed to you by other departments. No question that those needs exist. But this, in my opinion, is where the emphasis needs to be in the future as soon as we can start putting resources in that direction.
You've said that a couple of times, too. Just want to
Yep.
point that out, that it's been, so.
Well, with that
Not
said,
just because you're sitting here.
Thank you. Well, that's,
Appreciate it.
that's been
Absolutely.
said throughout the budget process, since you've presented to us. You have
so
said.
Chief, I'm going to ask an
Please.
unorthodox question, but I'm going to ask you the question through him, because
Okay.
I think this is a funding question that he would have to give.
And because it's shown.
Well, no, because I think the question really comes down to nasal Narcan.
Yeah.
Does the community, I'm not saying I said, does the community actually have a nasal Narcan program for its police department? As you know, many departments, and many police departments, I think Mike Morrissey's office has been kind of beating the drum in Norfolk County, trying to address the heroin climate. And you look at, obviously, Plymouth County, and I think that you look around us, there's a remarkable, I'm saying stuff that the chief already knows.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the challenge would be is, does any of this budget stuff include all the training, all these other stuff, this very simple reversible agents?
I think that's your overtime. That's
Yes.
all part of your overtime.
Yes, and the answer is yes. We've had 4 saves.
Awesome.
Since we instituted that, yeah, we do. Our offices have nasal Narcan, and we've had 4 life savings over that. And it's only been a matter of maybe 3-4 months.
But you're not going to see a line item for that, that's
Right.
part of your.
That's part of our overall training.
Overtime.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's part of our training, and yeah, it's good. And I can't speak for the fire department, but I'm sure they have done a lot more than us.
I agree.
But there are times when for whatever reason, we're there earlier, or we're there because patrol is nearby. So we've had 4 saves, and I'm sure the fire chief could speak to how many saves he's had, and I bet you it would be jaw-dropping.
Well, no doubt. I'm not going to begrudge the fire chief, because he kind of has to carry that drug on his ALS ambulance. I think it's fantastic
Yeah.
that the police department's carrying it. I really do. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you.
Any state or federal money out there for
For police officers,
hiring and training?
there are, when there are, we're jumping on them, but we haven't been successful.
Okay.
We received a federal grant, years ago for 4 police officers. We ended up losing them over the years through attrition. We received a grant under the previous town manager for 4 more, and he declined on taking that money at the time. He didn't think it was sustainable. I disagreed, but so yeah, there is money out there. I know my deputy chief has put in once again for a position. There was, I think we qualified for 1 this time, and we put in for it. We haven't heard back.
Okay.
So yeah, we're actively into the grants.
That's all I want,
And I'm hoping, if any success will be wonderful.
Because out of that $1.something trillion federal budget,
Yeah, it's amazing.
In fairness, though, for you to realize substantial overtime savings, one officer, you really do need
Yes.
Multiple.
essentially,
Yeah.
again, 5 to 6 officers to recognize the substantial.
Does that
That
mean
is exactly true.
Does that mean that there's room for 1 officer this time? We can just kind of put 1 grain of sand in the bowl and keep adding that sand until we get enough?
I'm not going to answer that question. As you may not know, it was late this afternoon that the governor just released his local proposal for next year, which really going to provide an opportunity for anything at the moment. And it's really in the legislative process there. So for me to tell you that there's funds available right now, can't do that.
I'll preface it next time with, that was rhetorical. It was
Oh,
more so, but I think that the premise would be is if anybody came to a department head and said, you need manpower, but I can give you 1, not the 6 that you truly need, I'm pretty confident someone would say, sure.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Not the first time I misunderstood the question, but that's all.
So as far as overtime goes, you can see back in FY14, we spent almost $200,000 in overtime. And this is some of the issues that I'm talking about. Right now, the requested budget for overtime, with that in mind, I requested $135,000, trying to keep it realistic. We talked with the town manager, and again, we sat down and looked at, where could we reduce without hurting, positions, and so we cut it down to $90,559. And that's what, again, that's working with the town manager, trying to get, a balanced budget under control for the town. Educational incentive, that's the Quinn bill. As, in one of the interesting...
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
So
Let me
you're
skip
cutting
over.
30%
Yeah.
off of that overtime budget. How?
Well, some of the investigations that we do, we won't do. Some of the follow-up that we do, we won't be able to do. It comes down to, when we have an investigation that I need to bring somebody in for maybe a drug violation, and I'm taking that patrol officer and I'm bringing him or her in, we just don't do it. It's a necessary evil, I guess, if you can't fund it. If we can't fund it, then it's got to come from somewhere. So am I happy about it? Of course not. But I guess in trying to work with the town as much as humanly possible, it's reality. So where else could I take it? There was only 2 areas you'll see that we cut this budget. Neither one of them I'm happy about. One is our capital plan, which we talk about every year. The cruises, because I think that's just a recurring cost, but that's my own opinion. And the other one is overtime, to try to get the numbers under control, to kind of flatten out the budget. If that answers.
It does.
Thank you. Educational incentive, the so-called Quinn bill. So that's the offices, if you were grandfathered in, and we hired you, you would get if you had an associate's degree, 10%, a bachelor's degree, 20%, and a master's degree, 25% in criminal justice or related field. The idea was to get educated police officers. We've since done away with that, so the new officers you're hiring, as officers retire, that cost goes away, and as new officers come in, you don't have that anymore. So that's a non-existent cost. Now, what I would say to that, I think this job has become pretty complex. I don't think it's gotten easier since Senator Quinn came up with that thought pattern. I think they're going to regret that, honestly, because a high school education is really all you need to become a police officer. And do I think that's sufficient? No, but I can't hold it against somebody if that's what they come in with. I hire them. But there's no incentive for them to go to school and further their education, where the Quinn bill there was. You got a rounded, you got a more educated. You've got to remember, we write a lot of reports. We deal with a lot of different people, and what better thing to have than a good, solid education? It really is invaluable. But I don't think it's, again, I think it's a mistake not to hire educated officers, or at least, maybe not hire educated officers, but at least put that in front of them, so that if those that want to better themselves can. We don't, but there is a cost savings eventually as we go through and retire people. Does that make sense?
I think most of you know, it is a civil service department, so
Correct.
the chief's ability to hire is within that system. So pros and cons to every system, but it's not as if the chief can define what the minimum requirements of the job are.
Correct. Thank you. And you could take somebody's life legally. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about the awesome responsibility that a police officer has, and the decisions that a police officer has to make, they have to be quasi, at times an attorney. You got to be thinking, and not to have that education, I think is a mistake. But that's my humble opinion. Maybe at some point during negotiations, contractual negotiations, that'll be addressed. I'm not sure. Night shift differential, that's the money or the pay, extra duty pay they get for working either the 4 to 12 shift or the midnight to 8 shift. And it's pretty flat. And it's like it's $55 they get per shift if they work midnight to 8, and I think it's 52 or thereabouts if they work the 4 to 12 shift. So it's an incentive, or not an incentive, but a reward, I guess, for working kind of crazy hours, and that's per week. Doesn't go into the overtime rate, doesn't go build into anything else, it's just a flat fee, money per week. Specialist stipend, those, it's all contractually driven. This is stuff that's, if they take a fitness test and pass it, they get a stipend for it. If they do, we usually have a stipend every year. We